Jake's life changed completely the day he crossed paths with a horse no one believed in. This frail and forgotten creature, which he named Thunder, was about to write a whole new story thanks to Jake's determination and love. But this journey wasn't just about saving a horse. It would turn into a struggle full of unexpected challenges. Before diving into the story, don't forget to like the video and subscribe for more stories. If you're ready, let's begin. Jake's fingers were slightly sweaty as he tightly gripped the small amount of money in his pocket. He had never attended an auction before, let alone considered doing something as reckless as buying a horse on his own. But today was different. As the first rays of morning sun lit up the small town, he walked toward the auction yard with an unusual determination. The auction yard was bustling as usual. Farmers and horse breeders examined the animals for sale, chatting in low tones about bidding strategies. Jake felt lost in the chaos, but his eyes remained fixed on one particular spot, the weakest, most neglected horse among the sale lineup. Thunder. Jake had already named the horse before even seeing it. He had overheard a neighbor talking about a sickly horse being auctioned off. Most people thought it was worthless. But to Jake, it was an opportunity. He hadn't succeeded at much in life, struggling with the absence of his father, and doing his best to help his mother. Thunder could be a fresh start for both of them. When Thunder was finally brought into the auction area, the noise in the crowd quieted. The horse's condition was truly pitiful. Its ribs were sharply visible beneath its thin coat, and its mane was sparse and dull. Its legs trembled as though it might collapse with every step. Someone in the crowd shouted mockingly, "Who'd be crazy enough to take that one?" Another person laughed. Jake ignored the jeers. He saw the broken spirit in Thunder's eyes, but also a faint glimmer of hope. This horse was waiting for a chance, and Jake's heart solidified with a decision. He would be the one to give it. When the bidding began, the price plummeted. No one wanted the horse. With a trembling hand, Jake made the first bid. $10, he called out. A few people burst into laughter. "What's this kid doing?" someone muttered. But Jake's resolve silenced the crowd. No one else placed a bid, unwilling to spend money on the horse. And so, Jake used his entire savings to buy Thunder. When Jake approached Thunder, the horse flinched and eyed him warily. Jake reached into his pocket, pulling out a carrot, and called softly, "Hey, Thunder. We're going to do great things together. I promise." Slowly, the horse took the carrot and allowed Jake to touch it. It was their first moment of connection. Getting Thunder home wasn't easy. The horse was so weak and exhausted it could barely walk. Jake led it slowly to the small paddock behind his family's modest barn. His first priority was finding the right food to nurse Thunder back to health. For days, Thunder sniffed at the food without eating much. Jake spent hours in the barn, talking to the horse, patiently building trust. One morning, as Jake entered the paddock, he noticed Thunder standing there, waiting for him. For the first time, the horse approached Jake with confidence, finishing a small bucket of oats he had left. Jake saw it as a breakthrough. "See? We can do this," he whispered. That day, Jake realized they had taken the first step toward Thunder's recovery. But the journey ahead was long. Thunder needed healing not just physically, but emotionally. For Jake, this was about more than saving a horse. It was the beginning of a story that would change both of their lives forever. After settling Thunder into the paddock, Jake knew the real challenge was just beginning. The horse was in worse condition than he had seemed at the auction. During the first few days, Thunder refused to move, ignoring the food and water Jake brought him. Each morning, Jake would sit in the corner of the paddock and just talk to him. He'd share old stories passed down from his father and speak about his own dreams. His voice was always gentle and kind. "I promise you, Thunder," he often said, "we're going to make it through this together." As the days passed, Jake grew increasingly worried about Thunder's condition. The faint glimmer of hope in the horse's eyes seemed to be fading, which weighed heavily on Jake's heart. One morning, when Thunder barely moved, Jake panicked. He ran to the home of his neighbor, Mr. Carter, an elderly farmer with years of experience caring for animals. When Jake told him about buying Thunder at the auction, Mr. Carter shook his head. Jake," he said with a sigh. "Saving this horse is going to be tough, but if you're truly determined, I'll help you." Mr. Carter explained that Thunder's diet needed to be carefully managed. A weak horse's digestive system was fragile, and he'd need small, frequent portions of the right foods. Jake took Mr. Carter's advice to heart and used the last of his savings to buy oats, carrots, and medicinal herbs from the town store. Though he was nearly broke, he didn't care. He was determined to do everything he could for Thunder. One evening, Jake returned to the paddock with a freshly prepared mix of oats and herbs. Thunder slowly lifted his head and looked at him. Jake sat at the edge of the paddock, gently setting the bucket down. "Come on, Thunder," he said softly. "We can start this together." The horse hesitated for a moment, then took a cautious step toward Jake. Thunder sniffed the bucket and took a small bite. Jake's eyes lit up with hope. "That's it," he whispered. This small moment felt like a major victory for Jake. Thunder was beginning to trust him. From that day forward, things began to change, albeit slowly. Thunder started eating more each day and moving a little more confidently. Jake walked him around the paddock every morning and brushed his coat in the afternoons. With every stroke of the brush, the dull, patchy hair began to reveal a shiny, healthy coat beneath. Yet the process wasn't without its challenges. One day, as Jake approached Thunder, the horse suddenly flinched and stepped back, his eyes wide with fear. He froze in place, trembling. Jake immediately stepped away and waited silently. It took nearly an hour for Thunder to calm down. Jake realized that the horse had likely endured something traumatic in the past. Thunder's recovery wasn't just about his body. It was about healing his spirit, too. Jake remembered something his father used to say. "A horse doesn't just fear the dangers ahead. It fears the memories it carries within." This thought reshaped Jake's approach. He resolved to be even more patient and attentive. From then on, he let Thunder set the pace, giving him the space and time he needed. One evening, Jake made a decision. He retrieved an old dusty saddle that had once belonged to his father from the barn. Carrying it to the paddock, he approached Thunder and said, "Don't worry. I'm not going to ride you. I just want you to get used to this." Thunder flinched slightly when he felt the saddle's weight, but Jake's calm voice reassured him, and he stayed still. Slowly, Jake tightened the straps. "That's it," he said, stroking Thunder's neck. This was the first sign that Thunder could overcome his fears. The town, however, was less forgiving. One day, while buying more feed at the store, Jake overheard some townspeople mocking him. "That horse? It's worthless," one man laughed. "The kid's fooling himself," another added. Jake tried to ignore them, but a spark of anger ignited within him. These people didn't understand Thunder, but Jake did, and he was determined to prove them wrong. That night, sitting by the paddock and gazing at the stars, Jake made a promise to Thunder. "Even if no one else believes in us, I believe in you. We're going to go further than anyone ever thought possible. Together, we'll prove them all wrong." Thunder turned his head and looked at Jake, as if understanding every word. In that moment, Jake's determination solidified. This wasn't just about saving a horse. It was about faith, resilience, and the bond they were building. Thunder's first bite of food from Jake's hand marked a turning point for them. With each passing day, the horse's energy grew, and his coat regained a healthy shine. Jake woke up early every morning to feed Thunder and take him for walks around the paddock. The bond they developed motivated Jake more with each passing day. Thunder was no longer just a sick animal. He had become Jake's closest friend. One morning, Jake decided it was time to take Thunder out of the paddock for the first time. Gently guiding the horse, he led him to an open field. For Thunder, this was an unfamiliar experience. The wide space and sense of freedom brought a spark of excitement to the horse's eyes. Jake watched with pride as Thunder cautiously moved forward, then gradually broke into a trot before briefly galloping. Watching the transformation unfold before him, Jake smiled and said with excitement, "I told you, Thunder, this is just the beginning." But it didn't take long for them to realize that not everything was perfect. Thunder still bore scars from his past. One day, during a training session, the horse suddenly froze and flinched, his ears standing erect and his eyes wide with fear. Jake noticed the unease immediately and stepped back. "It's okay, Thunder," he whispered. "I'm here." Jake stood patiently beside him until Thunder calmed down. That moment made Jake realize that Thunder's recovery wasn't just about his body. It was about healing his spirit, too. These setbacks didn't discourage Jake. Instead, they made him more determined. He remembered techniques his father had taught him years ago. His father had always said that building trust and earning respect were the most important things when working with animals. "An animal trusts you as much as it feels you," his father used to say. Reflecting on these words, Jake decided to give Thunder more time and to be even more patient. Jake spent more time training Thunder each day. Their mornings began in the paddock, and afternoons were spent working in the open fields. Their initial goal was to get Thunder to respond to basic commands. Jake rewarded every small success with a gentle pat and soothing words of encouragement. Thunder could sense Jake's patience and love, which helped him overcome his fears. One evening, Jake retrieved an old saddle that had belonged to his father. He cleaned and polished it before approaching Thunder. "We're not riding today," Jake said with a smile. "I just want you to get used to this." Thunder flinched slightly at the saddle's weight, but Jake's calm and reassuring voice kept him steady. Jake loosely fastened the straps and observed Thunder's reaction. The horse remained still, as though accepting the situation. Jake knew it was just the beginning, but this moment filled him with hope for what they could achieve together. Within weeks, Thunder's physical transformation was impossible to ignore. Once emaciated and frail, he was now strong and healthy. His coat gleamed in the sunlight, and his steps were confident and firm. Jake's patience and dedication had played a crucial role in Thunder's recovery. Even the townsfolk, who once mocked Thunder, began to take notice. The same people who had laughed at Jake were now whispering words of admiration. "Maybe this kid knows what he's doing," someone said. Jake felt a quiet sense of pride when he overheard these remarks, but he didn't let it show. To him, this journey wasn't about proving others wrong. It was about Thunder's happiness and health. Thunder's recovery wasn't just physical, it was emotional too. Jake began experimenting with creative ways to help Thunder heal from his fears. One day, he found an old tape recorder that belonged to his father. He brought it to the paddock and played soft classical music for Thunder. The gentle melodies seemed to calm the horse, easing his tension and bringing him peace. Jake realized that these small moments strengthened their bond. Finally, Jake felt that they were ready for the next step. Early one morning, as the sun began to rise, he approached Thunder with the saddle. Carefully placing it on the horse, Jake said softly, "Today, we're going to try something new, buddy." With deliberate caution, Jake climbed onto Thunder's back. The horse stood still, patient and calm. They started with a slow walk, and as Thunder's confidence grew, they picked up the pace. It was a moment Jake would never forget. He recalled his father's words. "When you become one with an animal, you see the world differently." Thunder's transformation was more than physical. It marked a turning point in Jake's life. Through Thunder, Jake had learned the true meaning of patience, determination, and love. But their journey was far from over. The real challenges still lay ahead. As Thunder's transformation continued to progress, the bond between Jake and the horse grew even stronger. But life has a way of throwing unexpected challenges in the path of progress. While the townspeople's jeers and doubts had begun to shift into admiration, an unforeseen threat loomed on the horizon, threatening to disrupt the peace Jake and Thunder had worked so hard to achieve. One morning, as Jake was feeding Thunder in the paddock, his mother hurriedly came into the barn, her face filled with concern. "Jake, did you see the man outside? He pulled up in a big black truck," she said. Jake looked at her, puzzled. "No, why is he here?" he asked. "He introduced himself as Mr. Harper," she explained. "He saw Thunder and said he's a very special horse. He's here to invite you and Thunder to a race." Jake repeated, "A race?" A mix of curiosity and apprehension welled up inside him. He knew Thunder was special, but a race? Was Thunder ready for something like that? As they spoke, Mr. Harper approached the barn. He was a tall man with sharp eyes, a smooth demeanor, and an air of authority. His polished boots, neatly pressed clothes, and confident smile made an immediate impression. "Young man," Harper said, looking directly at Jake, "I've heard great things about you. And Thunder. What a remarkable animal. I'd like to offer you a chance to show his potential. There's a big race coming up, one of the biggest in the region. It's an opportunity for both of you to shine." Jake glanced at Thunder, who stood calmly grazing nearby. The idea of a race was thrilling, but it also made Jake uneasy. Could he trust Harper? Jake's mother stepped in, her voice firm. "We don't have a reason to enter a race," she said. "Thunder is part of our family, not a racehorse." Harper smiled, but there was an unsettling undertone in his expression. "Of course, the decision is yours," he said smoothly. "But this is a rare opportunity to prove how extraordinary Thunder is, and of course, there's a substantial prize for the winner." Jake hesitated for a moment, but his mother held her ground. Eventually, Harper backed off. "If you change your mind, you know where to find me," he said before walking back to his truck. Though the conversation ended, Jake and his mother couldn't shake the uneasy feeling Harper had left behind. They didn't yet realize this encounter was the start of something much bigger. A few days later, in the middle of the night, Jake was startled awake by the piercing sound of Thunder's neigh. He jumped out of bed and rushed to the window. Something was wrong. Thunder was pacing anxiously in the paddock, and shadows moved near the fence. Jake quickly threw on his boots, grabbed a flashlight, and ran outside. As he approached the paddock, he saw that part of the fence had been broken, and there were fresh tracks on the ground. Someone, or something, had been there. "Easy, Thunder," Jake whispered, trying to calm the frightened horse. He noticed a glint of metal on the ground near the broken fence. Picking it up, he realized it was a lighter with an engraving that read, "Harper." A chill ran down Jake's spine. He was now certain that Harper and his men had been there, and they weren't going to give up easily. The next morning, Jake and his mother went straight to the sheriff to report the incident. However, with only the lighter as evidence, the sheriff couldn't take much action. Jake knew he had to take matters into his own hands to protect Thunder. He rebuilt the paddock with stronger, reinforced fencing and installed motion sensors and cameras around the property. But even these precautions didn't feel like enough. Jake realized that the best way to protect Thunder was to show the world his true potential, on his own terms, not Harper's. Jake and Thunder began training harder than ever. They spent hours each day working together, not just physically but emotionally as well. Jake's unwavering patience and affection helped Thunder grow more confident and resilient. One evening, Jake brought out his father's old saddle again. After cleaning and polishing it, he approached Thunder with a calm, reassuring voice. "We're going to try something different today, buddy," he said. Thunder stood still as Jake gently placed the saddle on his back. With each small victory, Jake felt their bond grow stronger. As the weeks passed, Thunder's transformation was impossible to ignore. He was no longer the frail, frightened horse that Jake had brought home. His coat gleamed in the sunlight, his muscles rippled with strength, and his demeanor exuded confidence. Even the townspeople, who had once ridiculed him, now watched in awe. One night, sitting by the paddock under a sky full of stars, Jake spoke to Thunder. "I don't know what Harper is planning, but I promise you, we'll face whatever comes our way. You've already come so far, and I know we can go even further. Together, we'll prove them all wrong." Thunder, as if understanding every word, turned his head and looked at Jake. In that moment, Jake's determination solidified. He wasn't just fighting for Thunder's safety. He was fighting for the bond they had built, for the love and trust that had transformed both their lives. Harper's midnight visit was just the beginning, and Jake knew the storm was far from over. But as long as they stood together, he and Thunder were ready for whatever challenges lay ahead.